This is a field with no insecticides and as yet no fungicides, just a basic regen approach, minimal tillage and a longer rotation and a focus on soil health. It's simple, but the results are beginning to show. If you're trying to bring regenerative farming into your system or just want to understand what's going on locally, I'm sharing what's working and what hasn't as we compare conventional and regenerative side by side. I just wanted to share something we've been noticing about this crop of winter beans. Since moving to a more regenerative system, the difference in both insect and bird life is hard to ignore.
So there doesn't appear to be too much chocolate spot, and what there is increasing amounts of is this leaf notching. The flowering is coming on nicely, and something that I look for, I always want a good distance between the ground and the first flowers to give space for the combine. So this is a new variety for us, and so far I've been quite pleased. Looks like a little bit chocolate spot speckling just coming into some of these leaves. Generally it's quite clean so far.
Good morning everybody, Saturday the 10th of May and I'm out in a field of beans. Let me just pivot round. I know it's not very good, the sun, but I just wanted to talk to you about this bit. So this is not a very big field. It's part of a bigger block, so it's part of the 35 hectare block, but it's been in long-term grass, and we brought it back into production because it just works as part of this bigger block. And it has been a highly productive field, but I just wanted to show you that we spoke last week about the effect the winter has had on the winter wheats being really variable, but it's not just restricted to the winter wheat. We're also seeing the same effect in winter beans. So let me just show you this bit. As you can see, the beans are pretty healthy, they're just below sort of belt level, waist level, but look at the size of this barren, completely killed by moisture and wetness. So I'll put a comment below for its drilling date, but whilst we're here I just want to show you the field next door. So as you will see, the field next door has a road going through its boundary, and in fact it's disrupted some of the land drains on the further side of that field, and it made drilling very difficult. The construction team had wanted it for use as a compound, so we'd left it fallow for 2 years, and all we did was claydon directly into natural regeneration. And actually here on the edge of the field you can still see the lines of the claydon. There was, as you can see, lots of grassy trash on the top. It was really difficult drilling conditions, and then if you can see here, you can see our most recent spray has hit the grass weeds hard, so that's a good sign. Now I wouldn't consider this sort of normal farming practice by any stretch, but it just shows you sort of what the claydon and direct drilling can achieve. And in this case we're not looking for top yield, but what we are looking for is for those beans to be a transition field, a bit like that field of grass we filmed earlier in the year. But we're looking for the beans to be a transition crop to bring us back into more conventional crop production. So let the beans break down all the residue, break down the root bores, then all of the carbon is retained in the soil rather than using multiple cultivation techniques to produce a seedbed in year one. So a little bit of patience, but getting a seedbed for year two. So that's the strategy with that field. Whilst we're on the topic of beans, I was in discussions with my agronomist this week about an explosion of broadleaf weeds within the base canopy of beans. Sow thistle, charlock and fat hen, some cleavers. We'll come back to cleavers in a minute, but we're seeing a huge explosion, and he was putting it down to the previous low input cereals. Certainly sow thistle is a real issue for us in low input spring wheat. I have an expression that your cropping system selects for weeds that suit the system. It just changes all the time. It's interesting that blackgrass is less of an issue. So for example, when we cut down the nitrogen, we're getting less issues with blackgrass in spring crops, and the winter beans gives us pretty good control opportunity. So when you're compounding spring crops, less nitrogen, and winter beans, we're getting pretty good blackgrass control. We've made mistakes in the past, and in places we've lost yield. Regenerative farming isn't a silver bullet, but if done carefully, it does bring a different kind of resilience into the system. This crop here is alive with insects. I can hear hoverflies and bees and birds working through the field. Not for the sake of it, they're part of the pest management system right now. It's a subtle shift, but it is a powerful one. You don't always notice it when you're busy farming, but when you slow down a bit and really look, these small changes in practices are having a big effect.
There is a lovely bee in there. Where is he? There he is. Doing his magic, working his way round the crop. And that's what we're looking for. So beans do require pollination, and that's one of the reasons we have hives on the farm, to assist with bean pollination. So this week there's definitely been a step up in the notching, a very characteristic U-shaped notch around the leaf of the beans, which is characteristic of pea and bean weevil. So it's not something we will spray for, but it's just something that we're aware of. And since taking a more regenerative approach, it's very noticeable that the number of birds we see actively out in the middle of the field has dramatically increased. And it's purely anecdotal, but I've noticed that when you walk around the margin of a field, instead of birds choosing to fly back to the hedge, they're actually choosing to fly out to the field, which I find a really encouraging sign. And in fact, I've got some footage of, I think it was a mustard stem poking out of the beans, and actually a bird perched on top of it. So go get those pea and bean weevil birdies, and we, as part of our regenerative journey, actually took a baseline measurement of our bird population. As an apex predator, we're using birds as a proxy for measuring general ecological health. So we've taken a baseline measurement, and then I think we're really approaching the point that we do a remeasure
To be fair, I was meant to arrange it this year, Tony, but I forgot, sorry. So give us a call for next year, all right? So this variety we're looking at this morning is Bumble. It's a variety we've gone away from because we found it was getting too tall, and the other variety we're growing this year is Vespa. But in actual fact, this year, with the drought-like conditions, it kept even the Bumble pretty short. So, and just to reiterate, the reason I want the crop quite tall, or at least why I want the flowers to start quite high up the plant, is because if they start too low, the combine header can't get underneath it. And that's a real advantage of direct drilling beans as well, is that you can afford to run the header right on the ground to scoop up as many beans as possible. The boundary of a railway is always a challenge for rabbit control, but in this particular case it's a lovely blossomed boundary, a very enjoyable way to spend a Saturday morning. This week we also managed to plant our last field of winter bird food under the current countryside stewardship scheme. Because of the dry conditions, we used a Claydon drill rather than our usual choice of the maul. Partly because the ground was so hard, and although we lose more moisture with the additional soil movement associated with the Claydon, it is a strip till drill, so it should enable us to cover the seed a little better. In recognition of the risks associated with moisture loss, we return the same afternoon to roll and consolidate the seed soil contact. I appreciate all the feedback on these videos. It's good to know others are finding this useful. Whether you're thinking of going into regen farming or just curious about what's happening down on the farm, your viewing is appreciated. If you want to learn what's really happening on a regenerative farm, not just in theory but in practice, hit the subscribe button. Join me as we test what works, what fails, and what brings life back into our soils.